Hi, you are watching SightsIn Plus, and this is Romesh Srivastava. Please do subscribe the channel if you have not subscribed yet for the HR news, for HR updates, and conversation with the top notch HRs. Today we will discuss about the work from home versus work from office. Recently, we have seen a couple of statements by the business heads. If I refer one report by Mr. Arvind Krishna, the CEO of IBM, he said that return to the office, else there would be lesser career opportunities for you. And there is also one more statement by the ChatGPT OpenAI CEO, Mr. Sam Altman. He said that era of remote work is over. So we will try to decode these statements with the experts. And today, to discuss in detail, we have two senior HR leaders. Let me introduce Mr. Milind Talik, his head employee experience with Ecolite Digital, and Ms. Usha Chirai, she's director HR with Reflections Infosystems. So, sir, if I come to you first, so recently Mr. Arvind Krishna, the CEO of IBM, he said in a statement that return to the office or lose the career opportunities and the remote work, it is the hazardous for your career, like these statements. And these statements are also getting viral. So he also tried to clarify that my intention is not to call you back to the office. Even in IBM, more than 80% of the employees sometimes they work remotely, but if you don't work from the office, then that is going to impact on your career. So how do you decipher these statements and how do you decode this?
Interestingly, in 2008 or 10, when I was with IBM, there used to be a workshop called Mindset. Even in those days, IBM used to encourage work from home. In fact, there used to be an allowance for employees who opted to work from home because there was a feeling you save on office infrastructure. However, at that point, it was the reverse. It was difficult to make people opt for flexible work arrangements because of the mindset that if you are out of sight, your managers will forget your contributions and it could be hazardous for the career development. Today, it's like 2 decades later, it's come to where the COVID crisis forced almost everyone to work from home. And then after 2, 3 years, people got comfortable in working from home. And it became a difficult task to get them back into office. While both have its merits, working from home as well as remotely, and working in office has its merits, I think prolonged period of time of working remotely makes you lose some amount of connections with the office. And many executives have been trying to get people, they used words like encourage you to come back, request you to come back. And when that didn't work, then came the phase of mandating a couple of days, 2 days, 3 days at office. And even when the trickle into office was slow, then comes interviews and statements where people actually blankly state that if you don't come back to work, you're affecting your own career. There could be a little bit of truth in that, because if people are not visible or their contributions are not known or they're not taking part actively in active discussions in office, there is a consequence that they will have to play eventually in their career.
And Milind, what is your initial comment on this? And if you can also respond on another statement of the CEO, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, that the remote work, the era of remote work is over now. So how do you decipher both the statements?
So first one, when I come to the IBM speech, if I look at the decoding, it's a move from compulsion to everybody wants now the compulsion to be over and come to the so-called new normal or normal way of working. During pandemic, a lot of aspects of work, workplace, and the tools and other things have changed. I think that dynamics are something which we need to look as a backdrop for all these statements. Secondly, what I say is, whatever you have hired as a resources, workforce in last 2 years, they have not seen the physical organization, neither their leaders. Remotely, they have definitely seen the leaders, but not physically. And it is pretty obvious that when you meet individually, one-to-one, okay, there's definitely a difference in interaction versus when you have a set of calls and you're able to work on a transition level. So the comment by the leaders is more from the point of view of looking at how do we integrate people into the work processes. We always, it's not a way to say the big statements like, you need to know the culture of the organization, you need to know, how your leaders are interacting with you, etc. That could be very easily possible when you physically come to office. Again, as rightly pointed out by Usha ma'am, that there is always a stages, which even the speech of CEO of IBM says we encourage, and then it says we want you to come, expect, and then want you to come. So obviously there are stages taken, and today why the speeches are coming in, we have reached to an end where we feel it is important, people are required. Okay, coming to the second statement on the collaboration, or for that matter innovation. Can innovation happen in a virtual world, or can the innovation needs people to be together? I think the pace of the innovation would be much higher when you sit down personally, sit down with each other, work with each other, and able to exchange the ideas. I'm sure there are even today the limitations when it comes to a virtual working and trying to deliver a project in time. So I think I would go with the statement saying that collaboration, coming together, ideation, innovation would need people to be together. Because let me tell you, many times on, virtually, you would not express yourself. Or when you express yourself, or when you're cutting it off from somewhere, your body language, your aspects, your physical things are not visible to the folks. I think that's deterrent to the whole of a process. Thus, I know it's going to be a shift of last 2 years or last 3 years versus now as to come together and work together. And I believe all the industry leaders from the more broader horizon wants people to come together and work.
Some of the companies that are also making the work from home, work from office, that is the part of their appraisal system. Means when the time will come for your promotions, when the time will come for your salary revision, the company will also count how many days you have been in the office and how many days you have worked from the home. So that may be also one of the point for the consideration when they are looking for a salary hike and they're looking for your promotions. What is your opinion on this?
Sure. So one very important thing I would say is today's appraisal systems is much broader topic, and I think we can come to that later. But I think organization which tried to change their stand from one to another had to bring in the new things into the picture. Now, one realization which has happened to the organization which you are kind of talking about is that people, if you give a freedom, people won't come to office. And that being a reason, the 3 days mandate has been given. On top of it, you can go to the nearest office. Those who are bigger players, they have offices everywhere in India. They are, addressing, saying that you typically come to offices wherever in India. And then accordingly, they are trying to set their performance appraisal system to see that you are able to have an ecosystem of the organization. And very clearly said by the top leaders of that organization, saying that when you come to office, you have not seen this organization. Generally, those who have worked in that organization for 1 or 2 years have not gone into the office. So they'll able to see a different perspective. They'll able to have the organization to be looked in a different way. And they will able to learn, from their leaders, able to understand the whole of a ecosystem and culture of the organization. I think that being a reason, some of the aspects are being brought in. I think everybody is going to have one or the other play with them to see that they are able to bring this up together, either by force or by persuasion, based on what is the criticality of the process. Both the things, in case of IBM statements, also IBM speech of the CEO of IBM, he said that some of the roles really do not need to come to office. Okay, they are back office work. However, if they don't come to office, they don't get the career progression because they'll not be visible and nobody would know their ability into any of the cross function. So imagine now what is
but for the back office,
absolutely. But for the back office, yeah. But for the back office, AI is going to be a challenge. In the same speech, it has been written, 7,800 hiring has been suspended. Now, this is what Milind Mutalik, as a optimistic person, I'm saying this is too early a statement. Okay, while you talk about functions which are like recruitment, like of some of such administrative function can really be done away with the AI. We need to watch and see. But this is, according to me, this is a personal opinion that this is too early kind of announcement to suspend 7,800 kind of scenario. It would definitely have a outcome or see other side of the coin, which we need to wait and watch. Okay, so it's, and that's where I'm coming back to the point saying that why people are linking it, because again the statement said by the senior leaders from the other organization saying that many clients are visiting the offices now. Now, if the senior leaders are there, if the team is not meeting the client, there's going to be definitely a gap in what is supposed to be delivered to the client. And if you look at this, is majorly into IT services organization, where they would like you to come together and do a service delivery, in the right manner. Whereas a product organization is more bothered. This is service related. Another is innovation. They're saying product will not happen. The progression on the product development will not happen if you don't collaborate. So these are the two point of views, I would say.
Usha, 2023 is kind of settling down here. Either we talk about the attrition, either we talk about the working model. So we are trying to settle down somewhere. Earlier we were talking about the performance. There's enhancement of the performance. When the people started working from home, there was a lot of flexibility. Now, is there any performance dip in the performance when more people are working remotely, not coming to the office? Why the companies are trying to bring them to the office?
Right. On the aspect of performance, I think there are multiple trends. Per se, productivity in the initial phases went up because everyone was getting used to it and everyone was aware that productivity is being monitored very closely. Then came the dip where, just because of exhaustion and the overdose of Zoom calls and the fact that people were working so long hours, not taking time off, I think productivity did dip. So there are phases and there are different types of people. So the ones who are working have become more workaholics. Some who take it easy have also been able to get away with it because nobody is actually watching, are you working or not. But if your output, if it shows that you are producing whatever your role demands, then there should ideally be no dip in performance per se. But then there are some things which are not actually very visible. If it's a junior person who's just joined a new organization, did he or she get enough mentoring to adjust to the new environment? There are so many tools that are new to the person. If you're working remotely, there's nobody looking over your shoulder to guide you. There's a lot of informal knowledge, that tacit knowledge that comes through when you're sitting in office and somebody, even over a coffee, speaks about a better way to do something. So in those silent ways, I think performance has got affected unless a manager was or a mentor was very conscious of guiding a new person, a new team member through. And like Milind mentioned earlier, if it's innovation, if it's an early phase where a lot of brainstorming, design thinking, all of that is applicable, at that point in a project, if people are not working together, again, performance dips. In some client escalation cases, we've had cases where we discussed that, and you do a post-mortem and you see if people were in office together solving a particular client problem, the escalation would never have come because people would have all put their minds together and solved it. In another case, you were working remotely, you assume somebody else in your team is attending a call, dealing with it, and there's a hit on performance. So we see multiple cases where performance takes a dip. We can't say all productivity has gone down, but there's definitely an influence when you're working remotely if you're not taking sufficient care about these aspects.
Milind, I think in the start of the 2023, we have seen also a lot of discussion around moonlighting and quiet quitting. So do you think that these two, moonlighting and quiet quitting, has been also the eye opener for the companies, for the especially IT and tech companies? That's why the senior leaders are also trying to bring their employees back to the office as soon as possible and as the maximum numbers they can have.
Absolutely. In my own way, I say whenever you are having a virtual calls, you are able to, like a iceberg model of personality, you are able to see 1/3 of the person, 2/3 of the person is hidden. Okay, and you have seen many of WhatsApp videos on this. So coming back to the topic on moonlighting, and quiet quitting, we have been living during the pandemic with unknown, kind of a trends. Okay, and I think moreover, again, coming down to back to office subject, more broader aspect, I would say this is more of a phenomena for the company, which is in IT services, IT product or knowledge industry. This is definitely not a phenomena for a manufacturing company, the hospitality industry, and for that matter, people who have to face directly to the customer. Okay, be it a retail industry or others. So this phenomena is more to the, a particular industry, which is IT services or product companies or e-commerce or such kind of people who are able to work with the technology and remotely. Now, coming back to my little deeper observation. So if you look at the pandemic time, there were advantages that, you are able to have no productivity loss because the tools are around you. There would be a fluctuation, but overall utilization is managed. Two, there's a cost saving which would happen for the employee as well as for the employer because you're not going with the capex, you're saving on your running cost, etc. However, there is another side which has happened is, boredom, stress, isolation. There are a lot many people who are not, staying with their families or stayed somewhere away from the family or even with the family. They've had a different kind of a need. And one of the trend which has come up is on the well-being. Okay. Because you have never gone through the phenomena of working for so many years or so many days away from the office. I know, like, Usha ma'am pointed out, I was about to say IBM is the first company who started telecommuting, that is work from home, and the allowances were paid. But the similar company had to change the tone because they realized the business challenges are different currently. Okay. Now, what has happened during the period of pandemic, many companies took proper care of their folks. Many companies have not taken. Now, that's where some people have faced a need in terms of resources, in terms of managing themselves. And there was an extra time available. Because if you are, I have worked out of Bangalore, I have worked out of Mumbai, your commuting time is 2 hours going, 2 hours coming. So if you're saving 4 hours, this cognitive, so-called hours, which are, you are able to be cognitively very, alive to work on a positive work. So you wanted to utilize time. And this has led to a moonlighting. Okay, because you have had that surplus cognitive time with you. Now, moonlighting did happen in a rampart. Nobody could take a hard stand. Whatever said and done, Wipro did certain, measures where they got rid of some numbers. But this is something which definitely is one of the concern where we would like to know genuinely the resources which we are showing as our resources are our resources for the full time. And yes, it does allow coming back to the office work, back from the office does allow us to have that particular aspect being covered. Coming to another, important point is while the moonlighting was done by the folks or quiet quitting, it was identifiable for some of the organizations. Some of the organizations could not find out, but some of the organizations have identified. But have they taken a tough call? They could not take a tough call because there was a need of these resources. Okay. And this era now is over. 2023 is not the same demand as, great resignation time of 2021. So the times have changed and the things have changed. Another very important thing which I want to make a mention about, now organizations have started looking at resilience, building the organization for a long-term period. And that being a reason also, they're looking at growth mindset, they're looking at leadership being retrained onto, facing the uncertainty. Sustainability is something which has been looked up. Various other initiatives, be it, so-called DAIB and others are being really taken seriously by the organization. And this is one of the reasons I would say they would like their employees also to be a part of it. Yeah. So I think there are various dimensions. Yes, there are lopsided dimensions which would be covered, but the much bigger picture is to have that, long-term view of the organization rather than a short-term view. Because in pandemic, there was uncertainty, even not knowing what's going to happen. Now they want to build the structure, build the process by which we are able to sustain and be resilient for the next crisis if they come.
So currently, 5 generations are working at the workplace. Maybe that is IT company, non-IT company, manufacturing setup. So do you see also there any flexibility gap with the generations when we talk about baby boomers, Gen Z, Gen X, and millennials?
You've pointed out a very correct aspect that the current or the Gen Z play much more emphasis on flexibility at the workplace, whereas the seniors might have not given that much emphasis on flexibility. I remember an organization where even arriving 5 minutes late in the morning used to be a huge episode of, a disciplinary action, etc., because you're a little bit late from the start time. In today's generation, if you were to call up a person for being even half an hour late, they would say, am I not producing the same or excess output than my colleagues? So there's definitely a huge transition in the way people view how much of their life do they give to work, how much can you ask of an employee who's otherwise extremely skilled and is looking at output and questioning you on, I've given my best, I've created a huge amount of results, then why are you focused on whether I started at 9 or 9:05, or whether I worked overnight and produced results? So there is a huge gap in the way the seniors in an organization might view this. But I think over time, this has been spoken about and people are conscious that you can't use the yardstick of 2 decades ago to manage the new workforce. Because the new workforce might even say, I will take a salary cut, but I need my 2 hours off to pursue a hobby or a passion that I have outside of work. So times are changing, and using old yardsticks might lead to lesser talent pool available for an organization. So organizations have to move with the times. They do need to get an overall output from an employee, but if you use rules that were used 2 decades ago in a manufacturing economy, they might not really work in an IT context.
Would you like to add here something, William?
Yes, sure. The mantra which I talk to my leaders and myself follow is bend forward rather than backward. If you're not aligned to them, you will not able to hear them and you will not able to make the changes which are required. Rightly pointed out, every generation has a different need. This generation is also the generation which is produced by the previous generation who gave them a liberty on various aspects. And that is something which is coming out, be it, instant gratification or be it, having to ask for reasons of everything is something which my generation was not having a liberty of, which this generation has been taught. And that being the reason at the workplace, this demands needs to be met by the organization, by the leaders. I think more understanding has to be there from the top leadership coming down to the managers who are managing the team. I think that's something, and that's where I said my mantra is bend forward rather than bending backward, because bend forward will give you alignment to hear them rightly and have your actions accordingly done to have a productivity and good, they being an integral part of your team.
So I think both the panelists agree.
Yeah, I would also like to speak about not just the generations, but different groups of employees who have special needs. For example, a person fresh out of college might have different needs versus somebody who's mature, has children or elders to look after. So flexibility also comes in when there are needs associated with why you want to step away early from work, complete some other assignment related to your personal self, and then come back and contribute. So that aspect is also equally important when we talk about the need for flexibility.
Yeah, I'll just add a point saying, obviously the organization have started looking at what is known as personalization. The women folks would have a different needs, whereas people who are staying in a joint family would be a different need. The nuclear family would be a different need. So while we were doing a survey of who wants to come back to work and other things, we understood the demography of ours and these different dimensions as something which could learn that, there are different needs of different people. So personalization is important. And I can't say generic, everybody has to have 9 to 6. And that's where even along with Jen's head, the rest of the factors which you said, which are important to look at as a personal needs and flexibility. So flexibility would have various dimensions looking at the demography of your organization.
So if you can reconnect Mr. Arvind Krishna's statement. So how do you see that? What would be the impact on your career development opportunities when you're working remotely and when you're working from office?
I would say working remotely has worked in a compulsion time. If you look at the organizations, it was a compulsion where we did that. It is not something where we have done it by choice. Now there is a choice. How does it impact the career? Obviously, whatever said and done, we are not completely mechanized ourselves. There's always a human aspect which comes into the picture when, I have to assess something, I have to evaluate something. I know many organizations, while choosing the employees, are doing assessment tools. But do they really depend completely on assessment tools? No. They would like to meet them personally, understand them, and then they would like to give them a position which is important to the organization. So when you are entering a new talent into your organization, you would like to physically meet them. Okay? Don't you think once you have a talent with you and you would like to grow them, you would like to have an interaction in person to make them work with you? Because while you are in remote, I'm not saying I'm completely against remote, but I'm saying there has to be a hybrid part of it, which every organization has started. Come for some time, use your flexibility in the right way, because 2023, as many of them say, is the year of, hybrid work. And it's not going to happen that everyone will come to office. However, I'm saying, for the purpose of career development, you need an ecosystem. Like rightly pointed out, the needs are different. The new entrants, 1 to 2 years, would like to learn the organization, learn the learning, learn how do they capture the tools, what is the culture of the organization, what are the behavioral styles in the organization. Coming to the mid-level, they would really have to understand, how do I guide my team? How do I become a bridge between what senior folks are really having ideas or ideation is to be driven, and how do I convey that to my own folks? Okay. And the senior leadership has to have a growth mindset, take the responsibility, drive the organization, seeing that they are able to, drive all these dimensions. You will not able to know this when you're working it virtually. So combining the factors or consolidating these factors of, various needs which are there, unless you bring them up together, because see, career development has a direct relation with the organization development. Okay, if you're not really able to produce the leaders, you're going to lag behind. And that is where this statement is very important, that, you connect, and really collaborate to contribute further. I think that's something which would be my take on it.
Usha, any of your concluding remarks on this?
Right. On career development, I look at it in two ways. One is, if you are assessing for career growth, typically organizations will look at competencies. And competencies include not just knowledge, but the way you display your skills and your attitude at work. How can a person assess those if you are not at work? You can, to an extent, assess people over calls remotely, but that final human interaction between colleague and colleague, how do you deal with a crisis in your team? How do you coach? How do you mentor? All those aspects require some degree of physical interaction in an office setting. Of course, when there was a pandemic and it was necessity to be remotely working, there also we produced heroes who could be rewarded and grew their careers. But it's equally true that now that it's back to at least partial working in offices, if you are not in the arena, you're not playing in that arena, in the sports arena, then you're just like a bystander remotely watching things. You're losing out on some amount of opportunities.
So I think both the panelists agree that working from office is important for your career development. Thank you so much, Usha, and thank you so much, Milind, for joining the conversation and sharing your wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.